1340 KVGC. On the phone with us is our friend Douglas Viviani. He is part of the team that hosts Everything Old is New Again, along with David Cohen, and every Saturday, 6 o'clock here on 1340 KVGC. And Doug, I see through the social media you have added more affiliates this week, huh?
Yes, we did. We're very happy to have added affiliates in Knoxville, Tennessee, and we're in Ely, Nevada, and the list goes on. Fort Payne, Alabama. So it's great for my my voice to be visiting all these areas of the country, and I'm excited to eventually visit them when the time is right, as we've been mentioning before. So little by little, we can have these stations be a bastion, if you will, of everything old is new again. We can spread like wildfire throughout the country, so we can enjoy the fun throughout the land.
Well,
and, we're very excited about it.
Well, how was your week?
My week was fun. I had a little birthday present that I give to myself every year. The All-Star Game sits just about on my birthday, and so I'll make a nice barbecue steak and boil a little bit of a lobster tail and sit down with a nice glass of beer and watch the All-Star Game. For some reason, it's something that has stuck in my mind since I was a kid. And I think what it is baseball in general and the All-Star Game in particular, I shared with my family. And I remember the first one all the way back, if you remember this one, where Pete Rose had his collision with Ray Fosse in 1970 at home plate and took him out, and unfortunately destroyed the career of Ray Fosse, but it showed such gumption on behalf of Rose to really take this game seriously as they did back then. And I just remember watching that with my family, and I guess from that point on, it's become something that I do every year. How about you? Did you enjoy the game at all? Do you watch it or no?
Yeah, we watched part of it. We watched part of it because we were doing some other stuff, and and we are baseball fans too. But it just sometimes life gets in the way. You know what
Correct. Correct. I definitely can relate to that. I also can relate to the fact that, having your own players, like you had Posey and Baumgartner in the game there, and that's kind of exciting, especially as a kid. I remember back in 1975, the Mets were so terrible, but they had one star, John Matlack, a pitcher, if you remember, a lefty from way back when, and he pitched one inning of a couple of batters, and was named the MVP. And, of course, typical Mets fashion, he had to share that. The only time that award was ever shared by anybody. Bill Madlock from the Pirates also had a good game, so they shared the MVP together. But it was like the highlight of my year because there was nothing else to root for the Mets.
Yeah, and didn't Joe Torre manage it one year, too?
He managed a number of years, but one time I remember, the pride of New York, you think you're so provincial, and everybody is thinking how great Joe Torre is because of his managing skills. And meanwhile, he managed in 2002 the team into a corner where he had no more pitchers, and they had to basically, the only time in history, stop the game and just say, okay, it's a tie, we'll move on.
Well, I watched an interesting show last night, and I don't know if maybe you've seen it. It was on ESPN. It had actually Johnny Bench, Hank Aaron, Sandy Koufax, and Willie Mays. And they were talking with God, I can't even think of the game now. The guy's name, Costas,
right.
Bob Costas. What an interesting round table. And they were talking about their life in baseball, and then Bob asked them each, to talk about each other. And it was interesting. There's Bench never played against Koufax. He did play against Aaron, or against Willie Mays,
right.
And there was a collision one time at first base they were talking about where Bench actually knocked Willie Mays over, and he had never apologized to him, but he apologized to him during the show, and it was kind of humorous. But just the admiration that each had for each other, it was some of the who else could you? I mean, I'm watching this going, this is almost sort of the Mount Rushmore of baseball, if you want to talk about it that way.
Well, I think that's what they did. They did some kind of this year to try to get the fans thinking about the older players and who is the best player that's living on all the teams. So they did that for every team, 4 players the fans would vote for, and then they voted for the best all-time living players, and they brought the 4 of them out before the All-Star game this year. And it's amazing that you watch players and you don't realize sometimes that you're watching history develop or some of the all-time greats. And I think those fellows were for sure. But they then labeled them, Aaron, Bench, Mays, and Koufax, as the best living players. And of course, as a Yankee fan, that kind of made me think of Yogi Berra.
Yeah.
Said, hey, wait a minute, what happened to my guy? And that starts the argument you love to have, right? To me, Bench had about 50 more home runs than Berra, but other than that, Berra beat him in RBIs, batting average. He had 3 MVPs versus Bench's 2. And listen, Yogi Berra won 10, believe it or not, 10 World Series. Not only played in, won 10. He played in more than that. Bench only won 2. So to me, Yogi Berra's got to be in that argument and may have been stiffed there a little bit. So I don't know. That's,
now, what did you think about Willie Mays going to the Mets?
I loved it as a kid. That was because Willie Mays was my grandfather's favorite baseball player. So I would hear about him growing up, and we followed him in the house. And then he came to the Mets, back to New York, and it was euphoria when we heard that trade, especially to the Mets, who at that time were just about there. And believe it or not, that was 72. The next year they went to the World Series with Mays, 1973. Problem was, he was really on the decline. He hit .211. He played in maybe a third of the games. He used to not only catch, if you remember Willie Mays, he would catch the fly balls in his, with his glove down, an underhand kind of a catch. But unfortunately, back then his arm was so bad, he would also throw the ball back, submarine underhand.
Yeah.
So they had to replace him late in every game with Don Hahn, a defensive replacement. But he was an inspiration back then, to the team and a team leader. And they went to the World Series with Willie Mays in center field in his last year playing. So it was quite great for me to be able to see him on a daily basis. You remember, there was no internet, there was no way to see.
Right.
The San Francisco Giants play in New York, other than when they visited New York, or the game of the week on a Saturday, maybe once or twice a year.
Sure.
So it was great to see him come back.
All right, let me just throw this one more item on baseball.
Yes.
You ready? Pete Rose. Yes or no?
I say yes with an asterisk. They've done asterisks before. He is the epitome of baseball back in the day, and I think it's something that's a little bit missing in the sport these days. And we're going to talk about that down the line in the show. He was Charlie Hustle, and I'm talking about just his play. He was Charlie Hustle. He didn't have the best talent, and he'll admit that he didn't have the best talent, but he had the best work ethic, and it's a great lesson. He worked so hard. He learned. He was an all-star in, I think, 5 different positions. He worked so hard at his game that because of his hard work, he became the hitting champion of baseball by far, and that is not something that I think should be ignored. Of course, we need to asterisk that and talk about his foibles as well. But listen, there are going to be people elected to the Hall of Fame sooner or later that participated in steroids, and that should also be an asterisk. Those two things have really affected baseball for the negative.
I mean, we have 3 famous ones here on the West Coast, and we'll talk about McGuire and Canseco for the A's.
Yep.
Okay, and of course Barry Bonds.
Yes.
Too. But now I say let him in. Let Pete Rose in. I mean,
definitely. Steroids, different era, different discussion. I'm going to fall on the other side of that, on the steroids, to me, because they affected the quality of the discussion that you can have about, let's just say, who's the best baseball player of all time, or the best home run hitter in Bonds' position, and even the 61 homers. These numbers used to be 755 for Hank Aaron and 714 before that of the all-time home run king. Those numbers have been bastardized as a result of the the steroid era. So now the discussion can't be the same that you have with your kids, really, if you're going to discuss who's the best of all time. But then again, it opens up the door for even yet more arguments.
Now, my son JD, who's 33, he says, and now he's not a drug user, doesn't promote the use of enhancement drugs, but he's always been. I mean, he was he grew up with Barry Bonds and the whole the Giant era in that era. His contention has always been steroids does not help your eyesight.
Well, that's true, but it'll instead of that fly ball at deep center field that's in the warning track that gets caught, that let's say we're talking about Willie Mays hit when he was 39, 40 years old, okay, they go over the fence. So who's to say that Willie Mays then wouldn't have been the home run champ, or Hank Aaron wouldn't have hit even maybe 800 home run plus?
Hey! As long as those home runs were hit against the Mets or the Yankees, it's okay. That's okay with us. I mean, the Yankees. Again, we're getting off topic here, but about the Yankees, I coached Little League for 100 years, and one of the last years I coached, we went to Major League uniforms, and we were always the Giants or. We were the Pirates one year, but we were usually the Giants or the Devil Race because they were the new expansion team. So that was fine. So then one year we had to be the Yankees. And Doug, honest to God, it was. This sounds kind of for a grown man to say this, but it's the truth. It was hard to put the Yankee hat on. I mean, and we had the jerseys, but it was just hard to put it on. I don't know why. Just because they're like the evil empire here,
Exactly. And that shows the power of the game, though. I don't know that any other sport that you even know the uniform, no less, revere it or the reverse in any way, shape, or form. And I think that's the power of baseball. Is that uniform's been worn since back in the 1910s, and hate it or love it, you're going to recognize it, and it stands for something, whatever you want to interpret that theme of.
Speaking about power, what's this week's show going to be about?
This week we are going to take a look at the superhero large and small. And what I mean by that is we've got Ant-Man coming out this week, and I'm excited to see that. It looks terrific. But his power is a little goofy, where he is able to shrink down to the size of an ant but remain as strong as a human being. So that fellow, along with, let's say, Daredevil, and which has a show on Netflix, and Flash, which is a big hit, Gotham, and a new show called Legends of the Tomorrow, which are coming up, which is going to be released on television in September. These are people that don't really have great, huge superpowers like the Avengers with the Hulk and Thor and so forth. So can the little guy in the superhero world compete with the blockbuster power of, let's say, the Avengers? We're going to discuss that and have some fun with it.
All right. Gotham is one of our favorite TV shows. We don't miss it every week. Every week. I mean, what a great take on the whole, Batman theme from the eyes of Commissioner Gordon when he was just a cop. I mean,
it really was. It's a great idea, and I think the best part of it, and we'll discuss this. I'm going to bring this up, is that I think character is more important than the power that is given to the individual.
Sure.
And if you look at that show, they've all got some kind of power or shtick in terms of their being superheroes or supervillains in Gotham. But for the most part, they're human stories and what makes someone good or bad and why they do take a certain turn. So I think it's a great show. I know that's been renewed and going to move on.
So what do you think? Do you think that DC was right? 10 years ago or 15 years ago when they started to put a dark edge on Batman? Because when I was a kid, Batman was always like, he was a hero, and he was great, and he was just up there with Superman. And then DC started to twist him to where, and you start thinking about it and you go, this guy he does have a couple of screws loose here. He's not right.
He's exactly right. Tim Burton started that back in the 80s when he did the Batman movie. And remember, that came on the heels of Superman, which was all pie in the sky and smiles and just an uplifting, happy story. So it was to even do that, as you bring up, to even just do that, and then now, of course, with the trilogy that just finished with Batman Returns and so forth, it really was dark. And you're right. I think it was great for that character. I think as far as DC in general, I think they've made a mistake to just do that, because it's dark with Gotham now, too, as well. And that's fine for the Batman character, but I think they've also learned a lesson, because they were being destroyed by Marvel through and through for years, and now they've done something with the Flash, which is more uplifting, more fun, time travel, and they've gotten a little more lighthearted. So I think there's room for both. I think you just got to be careful. Like with Ant-Man, if you're going to do tongue-in-cheek or do something that's a little silly in terms of superhero powers or whatever adventure this superhero's involved with, do it with a smile at some point. Because comics, when we read them not as a serious work of drama, but most of the time, especially as a kid, you read the comics for a smile, to see the superhero get out of some trouble and have some fun.
Here's a show that you and Dave have to do. Okay, who would win, Superman or He-Man, She-Ra or Wonder Woman? Start putting some of these New Age comics with the old guys and see who.
Yes,
who
I think it's a great idea. We're going to do something like that, and in fact, we do something like that. I have it scheduled to do something like that this weekend, where I bring up and I'm going to see if Dave can challenge me with the worst superheroes of all time.
There you go.
The antithesis of what you just were talking about. Well, we'll take it with that step first.
Solomon Grundy. He'd be the worst to me, with DC. He'd be the worst of all time. I can't. Anyway.
Well, I found one. I'll just bring one up. I forget the name. A Transporting Man or something like that. It's a real comic where the fella can transport himself, which sounds great, but he can only transport himself to the next room. So I don't know exactly how great a power that is or what that leads to.
Hey, but just think, if you're sitting watching the game or watching the show and nature calls, boom, just transport to the bathroom, boom, back again. You wouldn't have to get up. Hey,
exactly, the most relaxed superhero of all time.
We are running out of time. Douglas Viviani, Saturday nights with David Cohen. Everything old is new again here on 1340 KVGC. Next week, Amador County Fair. We'll talk about that. And we got to get you out here for the Calaveras Fair and the Amador Fair and everything else in between.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Doug, have a great week.
Thanks. You too.